Hello and welcome back to John Batley Railway Modelling, here again with another guide. So you can clearly see what's in front of you. We're in the workshop and sitting on the edge of my toolbox is an airbrush. So we're going to go through basic airbrush techniques and how to use an airbrush, or how I use an airbrush. So the question is, what airbrush do you use, John? I bet you use a very expensive airbrush to get the results you get with your rolling stock and your track and your layouts, etc. Well, you'll be surprised when I tell you that this airbrush, which looks extremely shiny and expensive, is only £30. Yes, you heard me correctly, £30. It comes from a company called Everything Airbrush, and the product code for this airbrush is an AB180. Now, this is a gravity-fed airbrush. This means the paint goes into the cup and is drawn through via the trigger. Push down, pull back, and that will pull air through the needle. Also, this airbrush is very, very good because it has a dual control, which is airflow, pull back to gain paint, but also we have a little tiny turning screw at the front of the airbrush. Now, I can turn that all the way down and that will make the airflow really minute, so I can get really close in on grills and roofs, etc. on locomotives. I'll turn that back out again. So how does the airbrush work? Well, first of all, you need paint, and the paint goes in the top. But what consistency paint do we need? And you've heard me say this before. It has to be a 50-50 mix of paint to thinners. Has to be 50-50. So how do you get the paint into the cup? Well, what I use are these. And there's a few more of them here. They are party plastic shot glasses. They come in packs of 35, but they are very, very good for mixing your paint. So say I was going to paint a underframe or a roof or etc. on a locomotive, what I would do with my shot glass is I'll put in a little bit of black paint. Then I'll add an equal amount of thinners. That will then give you the right consistency. And what I then do is I'll use a coffee stirrer, and I'll keep mixing and mixing and mixing and mixing and mixing and stirring and stirring and stirring for a couple of minutes, and then I'll drag the stirrer up the side of the shot glass to get the consistency of milk. Once I'm happy with that and it's been thoroughly shaken, I'll pour that into the cup of the airbrush. Here's one that's been used before. You can quite clearly see I've mixed up some black, matte black, and that was used on one of the Lima locomotives today. So I pour that into the airbrush. Most importantly, once you've got your mixture in your airbrush, is to test it. Okay, so this is why I've got a piece of card, and I always test before I put anything to any model or anything. But the next question is, what is your airbrush attached to? It's literally on the floor, and it's a tiny little electric compressor which you can get for about £50 off eBay or Amazon, whichever. That's all it is, an electric airbrush compressor. So what I'm going to do now is turn on the compressor. You may hear a noise. Here it goes. You can hear it plopping away down there on the floor. So in the cup at the moment, there is already a mix of black paint to thinners, 50-50 ratio. So how do I airbrush? So basically what you do is you get your subject. To get airflow, you push down. Oh, and there's a spatter straight away. So I know that that's not quite correct. That's because I've been playing around with that airflow screw. So here we go. We'll try that again. So there we go. That's right, my air screw wasn't quite correct there. So I'm going to do another quick spray. So airflow down, pull the trigger back, and it gives me what I need. I can get close in and do a line. So what we're looking for is that consistency, no spatter there. That's just perfect. As I'm pulling this back, you can clearly see I'm getting good lines. That's a perfect mix. But if I want to adjust, I can turn the screw also on the back of the airbrush, and I can get a full blast from the back. So this trigger will now deliver air, and then pull that all the way back, and that's delivering paint. You can see that coming out there like so. I can twist it all the way in and get a small flow. Then I can also adjust the airflow screw as I did before to get it nice and clear. So we'll try that again. There we go. So if I'm doing any close work, I've turned the air screw down so I can get into small grills, etc. I can do lines. You can see that there. So always test your airbrush on a piece of card before you transfer to your model. Obviously, when you saw that spatter a minute ago, I hadn't adjusted the airflow screw properly, so it gave me that horrible spatter, which we didn't want. Now it's fine. We see what I mean. It's nice and easy. That's what we want. So that is how you do your basic airbrushing. So if this was an underframe of a locomotive, you can just go along and then do that a little bit more flow. I can go along the side. So when you're doing anything like weathering, you just go from side to side, nice little strokes. Don't do all this like some people do. I always give it some small strokes like that until I'm happy with it. So that's a nice consistency there. That's just right. You can clearly see that's covering nicely. So that is your basic airbrushing. Remember, 50-50 thinners to your paint. Most important, 50-50 thinners to paint. The airbrush again is an AB 180 dual control airbrush from Everything Airbrush, and that is the airbrush I use. It's the only airbrush I've ever used. This is probably my 5th one now after 5 or 6 years of doing weathering, and it serves me very, very well. Also take care of your needle. Don't ever bend your needle. To take it apart, it's very, very easy. I won't take it apart right this minute because obviously there's still paint in it. You just unscrew the end here, you undo the little nut, which is that one there. You can then pull your needle out. You can then unscrew the end of this. Inside there is a tiny nozzle. You must keep that clean. Every time you use your airbrush, make sure you flow through at the end of your session with thinners and keep it nice and clean. A clean airbrush will serve you well, so just remember that as well. Every time you use your airbrush, give it a good clean out with thinners. Again, straight thinners into the cup, pull back, clean it all out. You can also put a rag on the end, pull that back, and it'll bubble and clear all the nozzle out as well. So there you have it, basic airbrush work from John Batley, Railway Modelling. Like the page on Facebook. Hopefully this has been some benefit to all you who would like to have a go at airbrush work. Any questions, drop me a message, or I'm receptive to any questions on airbrush work or railway modelling. Like the page, pass it round, and hopefully I'll see you again for another video. Until next time, goodbye.